Card Fighters, today we will be talking about the Stride deck set, specifically the Chronojet deck set, but not its implication within Standard, but what it's going to look like in Premium coming into the Worlds format as well as the BSF format for 2024. And with 2024, I want to wish you all a happy New Year's and get ready for today's video because we're going to be covering a lot. Stay tuned. Are you excited with the recent announcements and are ready to get some new product for your decks? Let me tell you about 50card.shop. They have everything you need if you're a card fighter or Shadowverse player, from nation splits, bundles, to even sealed cases. The shop is pretty straightforward from launch. All products available is right there in front of you and ready to browse. 50card does an awesome job laying everything out with some easy to click pages. My favorite personally is the supplies, where they have a wide range of exclusive Vanguard sleeves and playmats. I mean, look at them. They're awesome, aren't they? If you're looking for a discount to get started, make sure to use code NARU at checkout, and all those that do help contribute to the channel to bring more awesome content to you all. Hope you guys enjoyed, and make sure to click that link down below. So getting into the deck profile, I want to give you guys a little bit basic but still toolbox heavy version of what the Crest deck can look like for Chronojet, and I think this is the best one that we can show right here. And to cover it, you have a very simple grade 3 lineup. You run 3 copies of old Chronojet from the G series, not Chronojet G, but G series Chronojet, just so you can have access to going into your Stride while they're at grade 2, and 1 Chronojet V just because it's a solid rear guard. You can counterblast one, give it an additional 5k power, and then the no sentinels can be very clutch coming into the later games, as well as it gives you another force marker if your raid did that turn and you followed up with that card in your hand. Following that, we do run 1 copy of Bali. I do want to make it a little bit easier to find our Chronojets if we're trying to look for them, and just Bali coming in at grade 2 can facilitate that very well, just so that we have access to the new right fixer that's going to be able to send the grade 2 back to deck, call the grade 3 out, so you can call Bali since it says one place from anywhere, check top 7 and add Bali from among them to your hand. Now after those grade 3s, we were starting to get into grade 2s. We do run for the new right fixer. It's honestly, it's a good card. Like, it needs a booster, yeah, but it just combos very well with History Maker. The only problem is it's very counterblast heavy, so you got to work with the deck a bit, find what counterblasters you can use, what you can't use, and just try to find that even balance going into it. I will say that this retro covers a few cards that have a lot of counterblast heavy requirements, but just because it is there doesn't mean you should use them, and you possibly won't end up using as much counterblast as you think going into it. Following that, we do run 3 copies of History Maker. We actually finally dropped a copy of History Maker, which is kind of crazy from old list coming into the Crest list. Reason why is the right fixer's there, and yeah, you're probably going to see the right fixer, but you have to also sack him to find Major Gear, and you still want to keep copies of at least 4 to 5, maybe 6 of cards that can send something back to deck or find something to call a grade higher from the deck, and that's why History Maker still makes its reappearance into this list. Just also because it combos really well with your water, and you know who doesn't like time leaving, going back into Melum getting our pieces. So if we already have a TikTok on board, we can go back to a your water, swing with History Maker, turn your water back into Melum, swing with Melum, then use the TikTok to make another History Maker or right fixer if we kept the booster on board. Just a lot of like interesting interactions that are right there right off the bat. Next we got 1 Karunta, 1 Upstream, and 1 Delayed Blazer. So I will say this is kind of probably the weirdest 3-way lineup that you're gonna see. So Upstream is really good because it goes into a grade 1, and we'll get into a few of the good grade 1s that you can go into using Upstream. But Karunta is also just going to be our removal. Some people switch Karunta out for Zaza, which says when placed, discard a card from your hand, draw a card. It's also Soul Blast 1 to retire something that you discard. So you discard a grade 1, you can pop one of your opponent's grade 1 units. And that kind of works as well as a removal. But what's great about Karunta is that it's a remover as well as it moves your deck forward as well. So if you send back someone's 2 or 1, you're getting yourself with 2 out of deck. So it kind of works well in that essence. The problem is it's just another counterblast. Like, do we have access to that other counterblast? Is it going to be resourceful, or are you going to be burning out a lot quicker? And then our last grade 1 is Delay Blazer, which honestly I think is a really funny card to have access to, because you can have a turn where you just swing with your water, swing with History Maker, time leap your water into Melum. Already have a TikTok on board, of course. Then swing with the Melum at the end of the attack, put it to soul, time leap Melum to Delay Blazer, as well as get another TikTok because of Melum swinging. And then now you have a Delay Blazer, a rested History Maker, and a TikTok. The Delay Blazer's on place, time leaps the History Maker into a grade 3. And then following that, after you swing with the grade 3 or Delay Blazer, after the Delay Blazer swing, TikTok and Soul go into another grade 3. So you just get a lot of multi-attacking right off the bat on your first stride. And if they don't hit any crits or triggers just to give them power, they're probably going to waste a lot of hand for it. But after that, we finally get into our grade ones, which is pretty, I want to say that it's not fully tight. Like there's a lot of different options and I'll cover them. But going into our 4-ups, we do run 4 Ribble as well as 4 Mazer Gears. Mazer Gear is probably the major card you need in here because it generates the Crest. Like I don't really have to explain that any forward. Once you get Mazer Gear, you get the Crest. It is a AK base bad vanilla card that you have access to, so you can just start sacking it whenever you have the opportunity. You really don't need the Mazer Gear, but you know, it's there now. Following that, we do run 4 Ribble, which is going to recycle a lot of our normal units back into the deck. That's going to be our 1-ofs that you've been seeing, as well as TikTok. You can't send back your water, sadly it's a trigger unit, but you can send back TikTok, Melum, Upstream, Delay Blazer, just a lot of different options, whatever you're trying to look for. The one Chronojet just have access to a grade 3. The plays are endless. It gets sacked from a lot of multitude of skills. It can be sacked for next stage of skill. It can be sacked for stride. It could be, if you run Zaza instead of Karunta, it can also be sacked for that. So there are your options right there. And then we start going into our few 3s, 2s, and 1s. First, we run 3 Melum. I'm actually thinking about dropping this down to 2 and maybe running another copy of Causality Dragon, which we'll get into, or running a copy of the Steam Sniper. It's not Slishma, I think it's Lishma, and having access to those cards as well, just because we can discard for Lishma to time leap Lishma after she boosts a Vanguard to a grade 2, and then if we discard a Ribble, we can call back the Ribble and just have more multi-attacking there. But we do run currently 3 Melum. I just want to kind of see it for now. I know it's trying to be toolboxy, but if I don't see the Melums, I'm not really pulling off any History Maker plays, and I thought that was trying like the big thing I want to see. But it could come down to a 2 to go into Causality or give me a Lishma. Next we kind of mentioned a few times, is the 1 Causality Dragon, and ooh, this card is so good now. There is no questions why you should not be running this card in Crest Jet. I mean, you can run it in regular Jet too, but Crest Jet, it's crazy. Causality Dragon says 1 place from the effects of Time Leap, or 1 place in general. You can give something plus 3k, and then after you give them 3k, they have the ability on hit, you may choose one of your units and Time Leap it. Now, what makes that kind of crazy is when we have access to our History Collection Stride, it says continuous, this unit's on hits will count as hit, so you can activate their effects. And what I find kind of crazy is that Causality gives him the effect, so it is now his effect, and because on hit effects activate, his new effect that he got from Causality Dragon will activate no matter if it hits or not. So you're going to be able to time leap units while your opponent's at grade 2 with your Vanguard swinging, and that just adds so many more lines of play, so many more attacks to your opponent that it becomes kind of difficult. Following that, and lastly but not least, we got our 2 copies of Steam Breath Dragon, and Steam Breath Dragon can easily be switched out for the Lishma that you want to run, maybe a 10k or 2 Lost Stage. I currently was running Steam Breath just so I can see it, but I can see where Lost Stage is probably a better card. But he just gets us our Chronojet if we haven't gotten it yet. You can sack it, search your deck for Chronojet. Lost Stage is kind of better. I mean, you can't really play Lost Stage, reveal one of your grade 3s. I mean, you can reveal the heal and then search your deck for Chronojet, and then you still have to discard a grade 3 from hand, which is kind of rough. So I thought maybe running 2 copies of Steam Breath would be better, but it's a 50-50 trade because I do think Lost Stage is a lot better for the fact that it can be discarded as a grade 3, while Steam Breath can only be discarded to stride. So it's Lost Stage does work better when meeting correct requirements, but finding the cards, it's kind of rough to play right off the bat if you get it in hand. So those 2 can be interchanged, but at the current list I did put 2 Steam Breath in here, and that was pretty much it for the grade 1 lineups. We do have the 1 Elementar Sanctitude, and then we go into our grade 0s. We mentioned it, we had the TikTok Worker and Chronojet. Mind you, please keep in mind, if you do play Crest Jet, Mazer Gear does require Chronojet, so there's your options right there. And then I do want to go quickly but not too heavily into the trigger lineup. We do run 1 OT for Dark States. This can be easily switched to the red OT or the blue OT. I do think the purple one is good for the meta right now. In my personal fun opinion, red OT is kind of great. if you have units standing already, but if not, blue OT, better resource. Purple OT or Dark States OT, I kind of just enjoy for the fact that it gives an additional crit to my Vanguard, which we are going to be going Force 2 on rear guards. So just being able to get another critical on Vanguard makes it very difficult for those decks that are just locking you down. And yes, I'm kind of looking at you, Chaos Breaker, Mega Colony. Please just take my Vanguard hit. Like, I'm making it big enough for you. Stop PGing. Just take the hit. But yet, right now, I'm running the Dark States OT. Next, we got 4 copies of our grade 3 heals. I run no copies of the grade 0 heals that counter charge or soul charge. We kind of want to see grade 3s if we're trying to activate Lost Gear Gate, if we're switching those. But if you're at a Steam Breath, you're kind of good with running some of the grade 1s just to get that counter charge, some of the grade 0s just to get that counter charge, and just have access to majority of those counter charge opportunities, even though how small they can be. Next, we do run 3 copies of Your Water, 3 copies of the Draw PG, and 4 copies of Hard Pump Worker. Your Water, like we said, is going to be for the Melum, History Maker, TikTok kind of lineup. We're just going to be able to get it on board and draw 2, send something from our hand back to deck. And this kind of just keeps the things that we need in deck to access for when our Vanguard swings or when anything that Time Leaps is going to swing, just so that we know those cards are going to be in deck at that moment. And Your Water just makes that good for us, as well as give us an additional card in hand. And then following that, we also run the Hard Pump Worker, like we mentioned. We're running Chronojet. We can put it to Soul to draw a card, as well as when we damage it, we're going to draw another card. So we're meeting the draw requirement for this deck, and it's just right there. And then the last trigger we do run is 1 copy of Gear Cat. No, not the one for Enterana, I promise. We run 1 copy of the Stand Gear Cat just because we're going to have access to Chronojet being the Vanguard. So if we go into things like Header Round or Chimera, we can send something to the bottom of the deck, activating Gear Cat and giving 10k to our Vanguard, just to make him an easy 23k base and keep us protected from our opponent's multi-attacks that could be obnoxious, where we have to give 2 cards from hand and maybe lower it down to 1 card from hand. And now we're finally into the one and only G-Zone. The G-Zone is actually kind of finicky, in my opinion. It runs a lot of like 1-ofs and G-Guardians. So like any G-Guardian you use is like a one-time use. But in all honesty, they kind of meet the needs of what you want to do. So you kind of don't need to go to multiple G-Guardians with the same skills more than once. Your most defensive one, like we mentioned already, is going to be our Header Around Dragon. We do run 2 copies of him, just for the fact that people have things on board like the new Rite Fixers, as well as units that just, after their swing, ladder more attacks or could ladder if they continue to be on the board. So just Header Rounding it and trying our luck to put a new unit on board that won't be as impactful is kind of just the way to go here. Next, we do have 1 copy of Bearlock, 1 copy of the one from P Clan Selection, 1 copy of Rapana, and 1 copy of Allura. The reason we run a lot of 1 copies here is because they activate at different times that are kind of interesting. So Rapana sends back any of our grade 1 or greater units back to deck, searches for grade 0 and calls it to rear as rest or as stand. I think it just calls it to rear. And just doing that gives us access to possibly calling a Your Water or the Gear Cat we needed for another G Guardian, which if we go for the Your Water, if we keep a 2 and a 1 outside of that on the field, we can go into Bearlock, bind the 3, and because I bounded Your Water from the field, I'll be able to activate Your Water on my opponent's turn, putting it to the bottom, drawing 2, and then sending 1 card back to deck shuffled. If we call Gear Cat, like we said earlier, go into Header Around that unit, then the Gear Cat goes back into deck shuffled, giving 10k to our Vanguard. So both options are pretty much there. A lot of comboing on your opponent's turn. Not really big removal in terms of Header Around because they still get a unit on board, but you kind of do mess up the unit that currently can progress the game. And then lastly, we have the P-Clan Stride and Allura. P-Clan Slide is a solid guarding potential. You can reach 35k power if you beat its condition, but if you are going for that PG because you're fighting DP, you could discard multiple grade 3s from hand. It's kind of tough, it's kind of difficult, but you have that option. It will keep you safe if you haven't seen Elementaria yet, or if you were put into a position that you already used Elementaria. And then Allura, which is probably going to be the one you go into at the same amount as Header Round, says when placed on Guardian Circle, choose a normal unit and a trigger unit, put it to the bottom of your deck, and with that you were able to return a TikTok Worker as well as a Your Water or a critical back to deck. Maybe you turn a Melum, just more returnal, just like Ripple, and getting those options out. So getting into the strides, we do run 2 copies of the History Collection Stride, 2 Slishmas, 2 next stages, 1 from D series and 1 from G. 1 copy of History Build, and then 2 copies of Gear Groovy. So this is a very kind of finicky list. The History Build is actually only going to be able to use with Gear Groovy if you are performing the whole Crest, trying to get as many cards face up in your G zone as possible. If not, and you're put into situations, you can go into History Build first and then go into Gear Groovy and reselect History Build. So both those options are available, and the 1 copy of History Build just is kind of like having 2. So you have that option there. Next, we got 2 Slishmas. This is actually for one of those later games after you do your Gear Groovy turn and we're still going back and forth. You already kind of force bounded cards into your bind zone that you couldn't return because of time leap, and you can get them to have access to, and then that extra 10k going to the front row just adds on to the pressure. So most of the time I do end up getting 1 Melum stuck into the bind zone on purpose, just so that if I ever go into Slishma, I can get a Melum on board, and that Melum can definitely give me a TikTok worker, and because of that you just get a lot of multitude attacks. And then if there's already a Slishma face up in the G zone, because we run 2 copies of it, if we have the Soul Blast 1 and send that grade 3 into a grade 4, another attack right there. Next, we do have the 2 next stages that we need to talk about. Both of them you're gonna have access to for Gear Groovy, but they are kind of tough to use individually, because if you do use the G1, you have to turn the D1 face up, and then you kind of lose access to it unless you go into Gear Groovy the following turn and then choose the D1, because it doesn't turn anything face up. If you do it the opposite way and activate the D1, you can't activate the D version to turn up the G1. And if you use Gear Groovy skill and select the G1 after you've done the D series one, you have no options to turn face up. So it's a little convoluted there, but just doing it in the right order, you will be able to use next stage twice using Gear Groovy if you choose to go that route, or use it for History Build. Next stage, if you guys haven't known, both are kind of very similar. Just one difference: the G1 says discard 3 cards from hand and then D-stride that card and stand your Vanguard, while the D series says discard 2 cards and D-stride and go into your grade 3 Vanguard, standing it and attacking once more. You don't lose any dry checks, but you do have to discard cards from hand. The reason why they both have a different cost in discarding is because the D series one requires a discard of a Chronojet, but if you do turn face up with next stage, then you can be able to activate his skill, because you're already activating a skill of a face up card, and in doing so you don't have to discard a Chronojet from hand to go into next stage. For the G1, we kind of run it as an option so that we can turn another card face up in the G zone, and then because of that we increase the front row by 5 more K because of the Crest. And then we have 2 copies of next stage, which allows us to choose 2 Gear Dragons that are face up in our G zone, gain both of their abilities added on to next stage's ability. And then if you are already GB3, you can activate next stage's ability of Soul Blast 1, turn a card from your G zone face up, and he gets 5k power. Because if you do it in that order, you're going to be able to turn up a card that you need to choose for his ability. So if you decide to do your first stride with the History Collection stride and then follow up with next stage, you have the History Collection stride available, which is okay, but you don't have a target for History Build or Chrono Dragon next stage. So what you could do is just Soul Blast 1, turn a copy of one of them, then turn a copy of Gear Groovy and select one of them to have their ability. So either or, that's how you kind of differentiate and increase the amount of cards face up in the G zone, and you can choose between History Build and next stage with Gear Groovy. Gear Groovy is pretty solid just because it gets a lot of cards face up for the Chronojet Crest, and just the 5k power just makes those rearguard swings that keep attacking unbearable for your opponent. So solid pick if you're just trying to get a lot of cards face up in your G zone. Finally, we do have to talk about our History Build stride, our first stride into the deck. We can't forget about it, and with it we get kind of like the beginning stats of what we kind of require. So because our following turns we're going to have substantial power going to our rear guards, after we go into it we have no requirement to have power from Force 1, so the choice is to go into Force 2, give them to the rear guards just so that your opponent can take them, but they are taking a substantial hit. And if we are starting at 0 here, they only can take 2 realistic hits before actually guarding from hand. So you're not put in a situation where 5 hits are available to them. Like, they don't have a lot of options, so they have to use their hand to stay in the game. And even though the beginning rounds are pokes, they already get 5k power because something's turned face up because of History Collection stride. So already tagging for 16 while they're a 9 or a 10. If they don't hit any triggers, they're giving you a 10k guard from hand, sometimes a 15 as well. Just keep that in mind when going into this stride. Like, you're gonna still already rip hand right off the bat while they're at grade great too. And then finally, we do have our Harmonics Messiah. Harmonics, like we said, it's used for everything. Our decks, we get our 20k Guardian Shield, and then it's just an option if someone's damage denying us, we can go into there. Harmonics Messiah is just a staple all around for 24 clans, but you gotta love staring at the Messiah in your deck, protecting you, you know, keeping your SPs and your nice sleeves safe. It is what it is. But yeah, that is a little bit of breakdown of my Chronojet Crest deck. Just a good mock-up. This is not something that has been fully blown out, like this is the deck I took the world. It's like, nah, it's nothing crazy like that. But just want to give you guys an idea that Crest is a mechanic that is starting to leak into more clans. We are at 4 right now, and it can just take a lot of games going into it. And I do have to cover a little bit of the pros and the cons. The pro fact, you make it very hard for your opponent to not be able to guard the attack because you get 5k power going to your front row, and then some of the Crest abilities do make it a little bit more difficult for your opponent to commit more into the game. The cons, you are required to write a grade 1 out of 4 copies of a grade 1 in deck, and you only have 1 opportunity to do it. So if you're writing the right fixture and the grade 1, it's not guaranteed, and if you do miss that opportunity, you do not regain that opportunity later in the game. So those are the rough patches there, which make the deck kind of a bad pick. But if you are able to successfully get it multiple times, then you can probably get away with running this deck at a regional tournament and then going far with it. New cards can come around. Maybe we get another set of ride fixers or cards that say we can search for the card that we need. And the crazy idea is if they give us a ride deck in premium, but those situations haven't happened yet. The only con is if you don't see Mazer Gear, you ain't playing with the Crest. But that is pretty much it for the Chronojet Retro on the Crest Jet deck. Please let me know what you guys think down below. If you like this video, please subscribe. And I do kind of want to make more retro videos like this. I know I was a little stuttery in the beginning, but we are trying to break back into it and get through it. And let me know what you guys think. Which Crest deck would you like us to do next? And let me know. What are you guys' thoughts? Do you guys have some crazy Chronojet list that I didn't cover yet? I like to hear you all out. But that is pretty much it for today's video. Hope you guys enjoy, and see you in the next one. Peace.